everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Hannah and I'm a current student, and we have a bunch of other students on with us today to answer all of your questions. And we'll just get started by introducing ourselves and a little brief thing about what we're doing in the MSW program, and then we'll get to your questions. So my name is Hannah. I am a current advanced standing student in the School of Social Work. I'm a leadership and management student, and I have a field placement at development centers working in admin.
Hey everybody, my name is Diana. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a program evaluation and applied research student. I started the program in fall 2020 and I'm part-time, so I'll be in the program for a couple more years. I haven't started my field placement yet, but I work full-time for the VA and for U of M doing suicide prevention research. And I also did my undergrad at U of M, so if you have any questions about the city of Ann Arbor itself, feel free to ask. Also, this is a webinar format, so unfortunately, the attendees are muted, so we're going to be the only people with our cameras and microphones on, but please put your questions in the chat.
Hi everyone, my name is Victoria and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am an advanced standing student, so I'm in the 12-month track and will be graduating at the end of July. And I am in the interpersonal practice and integrated health, mental health, and substance use pathway. And we look forward to taking your questions.
Hi everyone, my name is Natalie and I am a 20-month student on the Welfare of Children and Families pathway. I went to UMich for undergrad as well, so I can probably answer questions if you have them about that. And my field placement is at Community Action Network, so I work in a community center at a low-income housing site, and kind of do a little bit of everything. We have a food pantry, we help with communications with schools, all kinds of stuff.
Hello, my name is Amanda. I am a 16-month student in my third semester on the Welfare of Children and Families pathway as well. And my field placement is at the Ginsberg Center, but really more specifically with the America Reads program. So it's essentially a literacy program where I work on, I don't know, kind of creating a better tutoring program and working with the tutors and the students.
Great. So now that we've all introduced ourselves, if you guys would like to put any questions in the chat or in the Q&A feature, we'd love to hear from you. And we'll give you any perspective that we have. And we can start off by answering a question that was submitted ahead of the webinar. Just going to pull that up. So there's a question that was, I currently work full-time, but know I will have to adjust my hours when I start school. What is the workload on an average week, particularly during the field placement, and approximately how much time is committed to the coursework? Does anyone want to take that question?
I can speak to that, I guess, a little bit. Well, for field placement specifically, it does kind of depend, I think, on the track you're on and everything. But for the 16-month and the 20-month students, it is 2 days a week, 8 hours for the first semester. And then for the next semester, it's 3 days a week, 8 hours. So 24 hours your final 2 semesters. In the first semester, it's the 16 hours. And I believe for advanced standing, it's 16 hours the whole time. Okay, cool. That's what I thought. So that kind of gives you a good gauge of that. And those are pretty typical like working hours. I don't really know a lot of people who do the hours like on weekends or late at night. I think that's pretty, like sometimes that happens, but I think they're pretty commonly like working hours. So if you're currently having a job that's only in working hours, classes and field does definitely limit your ability to do like a different job during like 9 to 5 kind of hours. As far as classes go, it does take a lot of time. I think for me going into this program, I was really worried everything would be like super, super hard. And while it's like definitely challenges me in all these different ways, I think like the hardest part is that it takes a lot of time. Classes are 3 hours once a week. In the summer, they're 4 hours once a week. And then there is definitely like a considerable amount of outside of time. But I will say that the most of the work that you do is reading. So, I mean, you kind of gauge yourself. If you're like an incredibly fast reader who picks up everything that they read right away, it will take you less time. I'm not an incredibly fast reader that picks things up right away, so it takes me a little bit longer. But that's my experience that I would not be able to do by any means a full-time job. But I know that some people definitely do, so.
I can speak to my experience right now. I'm at a 70% full-time position over the summer, and I am taking a reduced course load, but I'm also doing a work study and I'm doing field. So it's like a little bit different. And it really just depends on your pathway as well. I know for leadership and management, a lot of my professors have, readings and assignments that they put on there because they're great resources, like on our class pages, but they don't always expect you to read and listen and watch every single resource. So kind of what you feel is going to be helpful to you, and then you have those documents you can save and have on file forever to always refer back to. And so as an advanced standing student, I do believe it's possible to have a job while being a student, and field placement does start right in the fall, and you'll have field placement every single semester. So you just always have to juggle that. But your field supervisors and professors and advisors will always be willing to work with you to make sure that your schedule works.
All right, we had a question in the chat. If I'm interested in getting a research position, how would you recommend going about that? So there is a research office at the School of Social Work. After I'm done talking, I can put a link to it in the chat, but they publish like a magazine, I think like quarterly, every few months, about different research. Oh, thanks, Victoria. About different research or research studies that are going on. So if you're interested in a specific research study, then you can always contact the faculty. In my experience, faculty are really excited when students are excited about whatever their passion project is. So definitely recommend reaching out to faculty directly. Also, because the School of Social Work is, or like social work as a field is very multidisciplinary, you could definitely like look for research positions outside of the School of Social Work as well at bigger departments like the Department of Psychology, Sociology, things like that. On careers.umich.edu, they list different like research positions, including part-time positions. And there's also a student employment website if you're looking to get like work study or even non-work study research paid positions, but there's also usually lots of different volunteer opportunities as well. So whatever department you're interested in, whether it's social work or other departments across the school, highly recommend going to their website and, like I said, looking at faculty that you'd be interested in working with specifically. There's also the Ginsberg Center, which is a center with the University of Michigan that focuses on like community outreach and community service. And they have an evaluation/research group called CTAC, and I'll put that in the chat. And that's something that you can do, I believe, on a volunteer basis, where you work with community organizations or different groups that might need some type of evaluation help, whether it be with a program they're developing or getting feedback or trying to figure out like the best way to do something. And I haven't personally done it, but it's definitely something that I'm looking into doing in the future.
Great. So we had a question about parking, and I just dropped the park and ride locations. And that's, you can park and ride the bus for free from IPSI and other surrounding towns. And another question in the Q&A, and maybe we can have everyone just quickly, like a short blurb of what do you plan to do with your MSW degree career-wise, or once we complete the program. So I can start off. I've been hired by my field placement. So right now I'm going to go into program evaluation at my field placement, which is Behavioral Health Outpatient Center in Detroit, focusing on integrated health.
And I will be, my plan is to work in a hospital setting. I'm currently doing my field placement at Michigan Medicine in inpatient adult care management, and I'm hoping to work in a similar setting.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Okay. I'm not 100% sure, which is something they don't tell you will happen because I have learned a lot, and my views constantly change. But I really want to work with younger children and newer parents. So something like maternal infant health programs are something that really interests me, as well as like infant mental health, and also school-based social work, but not necessarily being a school social worker, but something that really works maybe on a policy level with schools I'm really interested in as well.
I actually do plan on being a school social worker. Still figuring out kind of where and what level. I've always kind of pictured myself working with younger kids, but I'm kind of open to anything at this point, and I still have a year left in the program. Well, I'll graduate next May. So yeah, still figuring things out.
And yeah, I graduate summer 2023, so I expect that my mind will change a lot between now and then. Like I said earlier, I currently work full-time in suicide prevention research, and I like my job. I work with inpatient psychiatric unit patients and do like qualitative interviews with them. And I like that, but I'm also interested in like doing evaluation and research and seeing how it affects policy directly, because all my past experience has been with like mental health interventions. So that's something that I'm hoping to get more experience with as I'm in the program. So it looks like in both the chat and the Q&A, we had a question about housing, and maybe we could also combine Maggie's question about could you speak a little bit about the city of Ann Arbor and what there is to do socially / for fun? So I can give a brief overview of Ann Arbor as a city. So Ann Arbor as a city is like a pretty, I would say, like quintessential college town. It has lots to do, which is really nice. So you don't really have to deal with the hassle of living in a city, but I grew up in a much smaller college town. So I was pretty amazed when I came to Ann Arbor for undergrad, and there's like movie theaters downtown. There's an arboretum where there's hiking trails, there's water so you can kayak on it. There's tons of free museums you can go to. And we also are in close proximity to Detroit. So it's like a 30 to 45 minute drive. And there's also shuttles that can take you to campus to either Detroit Airport or downtown Detroit. So I personally just really like that. I also really like all of the free museums I can go to. And then in terms of housing, there's lots of housing options in Ann Arbor. Somebody else mentioned coming from Ypsilanti. So that's actually where I live right now. And it's the town right next to Ann Arbor. A lot of School of Social Work students live in Ypsilanti as well, because generally the cost of living is cheaper. It's also a college town. Eastern Michigan University is in Ypsilanti, but people generally talk about like Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti as like the same area. I would say lots of really good places to eat in both towns, and good coffee shops, things like that. So Ypsilanti, I would say, depending on where you're at, it's like a 10 to 15 minute drive to campus, which I think is pretty typical for people, especially once you start doing your field placements. You're not necessarily going to be going to campus every day for classes or anything like that. So I recommend looking at Ypsilanti, especially if you want kind of more space, but in the actual downtown Ann Arbor area. So if you want to be kind of walking distance to campus and kind of in the heart of it all, a lot of the apartments that you'll find are like high rises, which can be pretty expensive. And I think more undergrads tend to choose that option, but then there's also different neighborhoods that you can find housing in, and those are like typically older houses that are divided into floors where you share a unit with like 3 or 4 other people. They don't always have air conditioning or in-unit laundry and also always double check and see if they have parking, because parking can also get expensive if you don't have a parking spot. I recommend the neighborhood Carytown if you're looking for that experience, like being really close to campus, just because generally I found a lot of grad students live there, and it's just like a very charming place to be. But then if you just go on apartments.com and look at the city as a whole, there are also tons of like more traditional apartment complexes where, again, you'd still be driving to campus most likely, but there's also buses that run kind of regularly all around Ann Arbor, and you'll have free access to that as a student.
Great. And then we had, does anyone else want to speak to moving or Ann Arbor or anything? I mean, Diana has like one of the most experience in the area.
Oh, sorry. I would also say, yeah, someone posted a link in the chat, which is helpful. I would also definitely say look up Ann Arbor Housing in Facebook. There's like probably 10 different Facebook pages, and you can see different listings for places right now.
Great. And then we have a question. What were your experiences with school finances, if any of you are managing your own finances? So I can speak a little to that. Definitely managing my own finances and definitely apply to all of the scholarships that are available to you. And your best bet is applying to financial aid and getting that in as soon as possible. But don't rush and, make sure it's comprehensive. And then if you do not feel that your financial aid package fully supports you, you can always reach back out to the school's financial aid office and like within the school social work, and you can apply for a reassessment of your financial need, and you will be able to reapply and possibly get more funding. And then there are more scholarships available throughout the school year, and you can have a work study position. This is a work study position. We are all work study students. So if you're eligible for work study, you can get a job within the school of social work or outside of the school of social work, even off campus, with variable pay and hours and qualifications. And it's very manageable to have a work study position while you're in school. It's mainly about 5 hours a week. And also knowing that, yeah, if you want to make a part-time job work, you can, and it's possible, and you can work with your advisor and your professors and your field supervisors. Does anyone else want to speak to finances?
Yeah, also just our financial office. So there's like the U of M Greater Financial Office through Rackham, I believe, and the Office of the Registrar. So that's like overarching. They are like the actual people charging tuition and stuff like that. So you can ask them a lot of questions, but we also do have a financial aid advisor within our own school. And I talked to her like the summer before starting the program, because I got really confused about all the different like grad loan options, and she really helped clear that up. Her name is Cerise, and she's super nice. And I know I've heard a lot of other people say that they've talked to her as well. And yeah, I'll find her email and put it in the chat. And then someone asked about how likely it is that students who apply for the re-review would receive an adjustment. I've never heard of somebody not getting the adjustment, but I've only known like 2 or 3 people that have done it. But they just had to kind of write like a short essay about why they needed it. But if anybody else wants to speak on that, go for it. I'm going to find Cerise's email.
And there was a question about applying for work studies, and yeah, you can apply for them before or after you get your classes. They'll be available throughout the entire year and the summer. And there's a link. Once you have your UMich credentials, you can apply to work study jobs, and we'll try to find that link as well and drop it in the chat. And it has lists of all the work study positions, but you can also reach out to the School of Social Work and see if there are any open positions. And then I believe that's the questions that we have in the Q&A in the chat, and then I can respond to another one that we got in an email. So we kind of talked a little bit about classes, but we can expand upon what are classes like in terms of size and perhaps structure, and is registration straightforward? So I would say size and structure is pretty much similar, but you're definitely going to have a difference between like macro and micro, I think, structuring of class time. I know in the macro sense within leadership and management and policy and evaluation, we do a lecture slideshow with discussions about the material, breakout rooms to discuss further with classmates, and lots of discussion board posts on Canvas. And we have about 20-ish students in the class. That might increase when we go, well, I guess it probably will stay the same when we go in person, but so probably stay around 20 or less, honestly, in person. And then registration can be a little tricky, but definitely reach out to the advisors that are available to you at the Office of Student Services, and just setting up a quick 15-minute meeting with them to go over your schedule. And they might have a great tip about a professor, about a certain section, or about a way to structure your schedule so that you get the most out of your time here. Does anyone else want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add something about registration. I think it's always kind of stressful, not that it needs to be, if that makes sense. I always get stressed about registration because I'm like very specific about the schedule I want. But I have, so both my semesters here and also in undergrad, I have never gotten my first choice schedule right away, but there's a wait list option for pretty much all classes. I think it's rare that there's not a wait list option. And usually if you do need a class that you can't automatically get into, like it's full by the time you register, you can apply to be on the wait list, which is just like clicking a button. It's not like an application. And then you can submit a class petition or a course petition. And that's always worked for me. I've always ended up getting into the class. Not to say that there's not a possibility that you won't, but there's a very, very good chance that you will still get into that class. Especially if in that course petition you explain like, I need this class in order to graduate or fulfill requirements. So I guess all of that is to say, don't stress if you don't at first get all the classes that you wanted, because it's still very possible that you can get into them.
That's been my experience as well. I think that I'm the exact same as Natalie, that I'm like, this is the exact schedule I want, and if I don't get it, I'm going to lose my mind. But I've always gotten my course petitions that I've put in there too. They do have a spot in there for you to put your reasoning, and they definitely want you to have the classes that you want to get like out of the program. So I think that that's pretty likely that we get the petition, and that is how they do it in the school social work, is through course petitions instead of necessarily waitlisting, because they want it to be on like an individual basis and not just necessarily who got to the classes first, which I tend to really like.
So we have another question in the chat about 590 and SEED in the orientation toolkit. So SEED is your orientation. It's just the week before classes start. And someone correct me about 590.
Yeah, so Social Work 590 is a mandatory class that everybody takes their first semester. It's your intro to social work class. So it meets it's I believe only 1 credit, and you only meet a few times your first semester. And it's just kind of to help you like learn about the program and the field of social work in a very broad sense. And I know that this year they are planning on having kind of the first sections of that class meet during orientation week, so you can get to know your classmates and your professor, and they really want to facilitate like a lot of bonding within like whatever section of that class you're in. The first time they had 590 actually was this past year. So it's still a pretty new class, but they are going to release more information about orientation in the next like week or so, I believe, and then throughout the summer, because right now it is still like a working draft of what the orientation schedule is. And someone asked if classes will be in person in the fall. So yes, all of the classes for incoming students should be in person. I believe some classes, especially if you're advanced standing, so you're taking more advanced classes right off the bat, might be online or have online sections. So classes might have like both in-person sections and online sections, but when you register for the classes, you should be able to see which kind of section you are registering for, so in-person versus virtual. But for the most part, it should all be in person.
We also had a question about the list list of the courses for the fall. So I'm dropping that in the chat right now. And then we had a question, how much time do you find in class working on schoolwork each week, roughly? So I guess for me, in class, they say it's 3 hours sometimes, but I've never really met for a class for the full 3 hours. If you do, you get like a half an hour break in between, at least for my macro classes. So I would say about maybe 8 to 10 hours of classes. My math could be wrong, but that's what it feels like. And probably about, I guess, 8 to 10 hours of coursework. How about you guys?
I actually have been tracking this because one of my professors last semester told us like how much they're trained on, like of outside of class time that we should be spending. And it was like 3 hours for every credit hour outside of class. So if you're doing that, it's a lot. And I was like, I feel like I might actually be doing that because I feel like I'm doing a lot. So including my 24 hours of field that I do every week, and class time and time I'm spending doing like coursework, it's like between 30 and 40 normally, which it feels like a lot. And I know that I tend to like spend quite a bit of time doing stuff, and I do all of the readings like that we're given. And for my classes, a lot of times, unlike what Hannah said, like we're usually given like a lot of extra resources, but we're usually given like a lot of stuff that's like, please have this read before you come to class. So that's a lot of time. But I will also say that, like, kind of off topic, but with the stuff that they say, like, please have this read, just be aware that, like, when professors say that, like, we don't do a lot of, like, talking about the things we read in class. It's more like, if you want to understand what they're actually lecturing on, it's helpful to read it. And, like, a lot of what grad school is, like, taking that initiative to do a lot of that outside work and learning a lot of it on your own, because you're really only in class for the like 2 to 3 hours, like Hannah said. And that's just really not that much time when most of the learning happens outside of the classroom.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think just because they tell you to read 200 pages doesn't mean you actually have to read 200 pages. Just kind of know yourself and know your learning style, I think, and you'll be able to get through okay. Usually just skimming is fine. It's not like you're not going to be like tested on anything. We don't really have tests here. It's a lot of papers and projects. I don't know if that helps you feel better or not, but it helped me feel better knowing you don't have to really memorize things too much. But I would say it kind of depends on the week, how much work I have to do outside of class. I have some weeks where I feel like it's just everything all at once. Like I have 3 papers due in the same week, and then other weeks I have like nothing except readings. But they do also give you due dates like well ahead of time, so you can work ahead and get a head start on things usually if you want to, which is what I tend to do.
Yeah, completely agree with what everybody said. I'll also say that it's very dependent on the professor, but I found that in general, professors are also really flexible about due dates. So even if you're saying like, can I have an extension on this just because there's like 3 papers due the same week, they're usually like very understanding, just letting them know ahead of time. There was a question about when you register, so you'll get more information in the next couple of weeks about that. People aren't registering, that doesn't start until July, I believe. And we do have a webinar on June 30th where we'll specifically be answering questions about classes and professors. So that's Wednesday, June 30th from 6 to 7. So you should be able to attend that or watch the recording of that before you register for classes.
So we also had a question about knowing of anyone in the online MSW mental health track. So that just started in May. It's a brand new online program that's actually meant to be online, not what we've all experienced this past year. So we can try to put you in contact with someone if they're willing to talk to you, but they just started their program. So they're about a month in, maybe only a couple weeks. So I don't know if they'll give you the best idea of what it's like, but it is part-time. And yeah, it's just for the IP, so the integrated, I'm gonna say it wrong, but Victoria can tell you more about that pathway, but we can't tell you too much about just that program specifically.
I'm also going to drop it in the chat, but feel free to reach out to the ssw.msw.info@umich with any more questions about the online program, since it is newer. We all don't have too much information that we can answer on it, but if you have any further questions, as Hannah mentioned, about the interpersonal practice pathway, I would be happy to answer them.
And then we had a question about where you do your registration. So the course catalog is just where you can see some of the, or majority of the courses offered, but I will say that it's not always 100% accurate. You will then do your course registration in Wolverine Access, and more information about how to access this, video tutorials, all that jazz. You will not be left in the dark. You'll have plenty of resources that we'll be sending you very, very soon about how to actually register for everything. But you can look at the course catalog for fall 2021 and start to see some of the course offerings, but they might not all be available, and the scheduling might look a little bit different from what's actually available.
Yeah, I'm dropping the URL in the chat, but Wolverine Access, like Hannah said, is where you will end up registering for classes once you get your registration time and date. This is also the place where it's basically your like student portal. So anything that has to do with like the logistics of actually being in school, like paying tuition, accepting financial aid, checking your grades, like your final grades and your transcript, and registering for classes, that's kind of going to be your hub. But don't worry if you haven't like gotten familiar with it yet, because they're going to be sending out way more information about that later on in the summer.
So if you have another question that got lost in the shuffle, feel free to send it again. But I believe we've answered most of them. Oh, we have another one coming in hot. Okay, are you ever able to take classes in other departments? Yes, I love this question. I've taken a class in another school of the university every semester, and I've loved it. I think it's a great class offering opportunity that U of M provides, and specifically that the School of Social Work is in full support of, because we are a very interdisciplinary major in industry and field. So I took a class in the School of Public Policy, and I got it to count for my policy requirement as a macro student. But I believe actually everyone has a policy requirement. So I was able to do, like Natalie said, one of those course petitions. And I said, can this public policy school class count for my social work public or policy class requirement? And they said yes. It was pretty easy, got the A-OK from the public policy professor, and was able to take the class with public policy students and write a policy review for the Government Accountability Office, who informs the US Congress. A very cool opportunity. And then I was able to take a class in the College of Engineering randomly on entrepreneurial studies and consulting and project management. And that counted for my project management course within the School of Social Work Leadership and Management pathway. So seek it out, ask your professors, just go on the other departments and schools' websites and find their course catalogs and like just poke around and have fun. That's what I did my summer going into the fall. I used that time to just kind of just poke around and see what I could find, and then email my advisor, email anyone at the Office of Student Services, and see what you can find. Anyone else have anything on that?
There's also, if you're interested in taking foreign languages, they're not offered like directly by School of Social Work professors, but there's a bunch of different languages that are offered at U of M. So there's like a form that you can fill out to convert foreign languages to count as electives towards your degree. And in the form, you just have to describe like why learning that language is benefiting your degree. So I know people that have done that, and the only thing you need to keep in mind is that credit hours work a little bit differently, because most of those classes are probably undergrad classes, and I believe graduate credits just are just work out to be a little bit different. So you'll just have to talk to the Office of Registrar about that. And then kind of in conjunction with that, where someone asked if there are advisors or anything that are available to help. So yes, you can always email the registrar and they can answer your like technical questions. There's also the technical group of advisors at the School of Social Work. So if you have questions about like credits to graduate or specific classes you need, things like that, definitely recommend reaching out to them. But when you are at orientation, you're also going to be assigned an individual faculty advisor, and that advisor, the like individual you're assigned to, they're really there to help you just kind of throughout the program more broadly about like figuring out what you want out of your degree and things like that. But when it comes to the nitty gritty, like I need 3 credits, show me like what electives can I take, you can talk to the technical advisors about it. And then someone asked, are the first semester courses all required? How many electives are there for the first semester / year? So it really depends on what track you're on, like what time track. So if you're coming in advanced standing, then you're probably not going to be taking the same first semester courses as the rest of us. But for the most part, the first semester, if you're not an advanced standing student, so you are needing to get that general like social work background, they're all required, but they have a bunch of different sections, because I know like those are going to be the most popular classes that people have to take. So those are all required, but there is a way where you can basically petition to get out of the class if you can prove that you have prior academic experience in like a very similar course. So it's called an exemption. So I filled out an exemption request for the basic research class, like research basics. I don't remember the course number, just because in undergrad I took a lot of research classes. So I was able to use like my past course syllabi to show that I had learned like what's on the current classes syllabi. But the one class that I think that they really require everybody to take, even if you're advanced standing, is Introduction to Social Justice in Social Work and Diversity in Social Justice, which is Social Work 504. And that's just for everybody, because I think it does a good job of like talking about community and identity and things like that. So then that kind of, and with the electives, it depends again with how you choose to do your schedule. A lot of electives that you can take can be 1 credit. So they might just meet like 3 or 4 evenings in a semester, or they might meet like 1 weekend, like 2 8 to 5 classes. Does anybody else want to talk about like classes your first semester / first year?
I'm
You just muted yourself.
okay. I'm dropping a link. I see that. Thank you. In the chat right now, I had put in one for all of these course-related forms about the exemption and petition and stuff. If you're interested in trying to get the exemption, you do have to put in one of those forms. But I did just drop another one in for the course planning worksheets, because that was like slash is my lifesaver still. It gets a lot less. Like I don't even need to follow it for my last semester because I've taken all of the courses except for my like capstone class at this point. But for those first like 2 semesters, it's really helpful to like, it shows you the last classes or like the classes that you need to take, which ones are required, which ones count for like, because I know for at least the Welfare of Children and Families pathway, you have to take like 3 credits of a Welfare of Children and Families elective. And there's certain classes that count as one of those electives. So they like show you the list of those that count for that. But there's also just like, they show you slots for when you can take an elective and everything like that, and how many credits they project you to have. However, I will also say too that like, if you're attending as a full-time student, full-time is 9 credits, and any more credits you take than that costs the same amount. So, and don't overload yourself, because I did that last semester and now I'm super burnt out this semester. So there's a fine line, but it does cost the same for you to take 9 credits as it does for you to take 19, and that's pretty cool. So you do have that option in there. So you can kind of load up on as many electives as you want to, depending on how many classes you're willing to take.
That's a great, dropping that course worksheet. I don't know what email they send out that I randomly got that link when I was registering, but completely a lifesaver. Bookmark it, save it, put it on your desktop, keep checking back. Another question we had was about entering fieldwork. Do we have to do it as a normal class registration? So kind of, but not really. You will get all of this information in a registration tutorial video that I actually made. So you'll get that soon, and it'll explain just the intricacies of how you actually register for field. But it's within Wolverine Access, just like you would register for a course. And then there's just some little intricacies that wouldn't even make sense to you right now if I tried to explain it to you. So you'll be getting all of that information very, very soon. And another question about mandatory to complete that Canvas course that they want you to take. So if I believe that could be that social work, do you guys remember what that was for us? And I don't think it was in Canvas.
It's different this year.
Okay.
Like they're creating a so I believe I'm not exactly sure by what you mean by Canvas course. So when you do your orientation, you will have an account on Canvas by then. So Canvas is like where you're going to access basically all of your class, like syllabus, files, materials, lecture slides, things like that. And they have a Canvas page that they're making specifically for orientation. So it will have that schedule for you. They might have you do pre-work that they want you to complete before orientation. I like if they said something was mandatory, I think that just like technically will probably just be like highly recommended. I don't think that they're going to track you, like they're keeping track of who does what before classes start. I know there are some things that you definitely need to do, like financial like deposits and signing the like technical standards and things like that. But if it's like if it's like a module on Canvas or something, I don't think there's a way for them to keep track of it. But I also am not exactly sure because this is new. Sorry, if you have more information about what the Canvas course is, we can try to answer it if we have more information. Sorry for being so vague. And then somebody in the Q&A asked, if I'm an advanced standing student, do you think my classes will be online in the fall? So again, I'm not sure. It just really depends on what classes you're registering to take. So if you, for example, if you're taking that like social work and diversity class that everybody takes, that's probably going to be in person. But the reason why I said earlier that if you're at advanced standing, that some of your classes might be online is because as they're trying to integrate everybody to be back in person, because those of us who started in the fall have just been online completely this whole time, for the people that are graduating in December, they wanted to make sure they could offer online courses so people didn't have to move to Ann Arbor or move to campus for only one semester. So that's the only reason why I said that advanced standing students might have virtual classes still. But again, they are really trying to make everything as in person as possible. So if they do have classes that they know a lot of advanced standing students will need, they've definitely heard feedback from students that they want in-person learning. So they're planning on opening more in-person sections when they can. And it also just depends on the professor as well. So I would say that if you're in if you're in a more like popular field like interpersonal practice, that's like I think 2/3 of our students are, you probably will be able to find in-person sections pretty easily just because there's a bunch that will be offered. But like, for example, I'm program evaluation and applied research, and like there's like 8 other people in my pathway. It's brand new. So there's like probably less options, and they're probably only offering virtual for that. But again, it's totally up to each professor, and you'll find out more information next month.
So I feel like we might have touched on this question a little bit, but someone asked anything you recommend to do, or I guess avoid first semester. And we kind of talked about classes, but if anyone wants to elaborate on just in general within the School of Social Work, what we recommend for your first semester, I would just say get involved as much as your capacity will allow you. Sign up for those emails that from the student union about maybe joining the student union, which is our kind of student governing body within the School of Social Work, who advocate for us on behalf of all students to the administration. There's also some other identity coalitions. There's so many, and there are other groups within the School of Social Work that you can join, or with outside of the School of Social Work. And you'll get a bajillion emails about every opportunity. So take a break from your email. Don't get overwhelmed. You don't have to read every email because there will be a lot. That was one thing I was not prepared for, was the amount of emails. But you might want to check out 1 or 2 if they flag your interest, and just try going to a meeting, see what it's like, and start meeting some people.
Yeah, I definitely probably had a little bit of a different first semester just because I was part-time. So I didn't have like any classes in my actual pathway until actually like like this semester, just because it didn't like work with my schedule and what I was able to take. But I ended up taking a lot of classes outside of my pathway that do count, towards graduation as elective credits. And I really liked that. Again, like I said before, there's electives that are like 1 credit that you can take, and you don't need to have like an intro class done by then. So anybody can take them. And they're really interesting. They're like just like really short, like quick shots of information. And if you're more interested, like you can always, talk more with the professor, or it might even guide the classes that you'd like to take in the future as well. So if you have the flexibility in your schedule to, I would recommend just taking a class that sounds interesting to you, even if you don't think that, like you're actually going to work, for example, in like immigration advocacy or something in social work. Like I took an immigration class and it was super interesting to me, and it made me think like, oh, I could do that. So I just recommend don't feel like you are shoehorned into like one area, because like it definitely makes sense if you just want to focus there, that's totally okay. But if there's something that piques your interest, many, like I've never been in a class really where there's been only one pathway represented amongst the students, if that makes sense.
Definitely agree with that. And this is not necessarily first semester specific, but my mantra has kind of been, when in doubt, reach out. If there's something that you want to do or something you want to know about, or just anything you have questions about, reach out like to whoever. Like your professors definitely want to help you. They're all social workers, like they're practicing social workers, which means they really, really want to help you and they want you to do well. And I know like sometimes it doesn't always feel like that. At least for me in undergrad, I didn't always feel like my professors genuinely cared about my learning, but I absolutely feel like they do here. And there's also just little things like I wouldn't have known if I didn't reach out. Like you get assigned a faculty advisor, and they kind of match you up with them based on your interests and like what they've done in their careers. But if you, for whatever reason, find another professor that you'd like to be your advisor, or you don't get along with yours for whatever reason, you can request to have a different advisor. And that's just something I don't think I ever would have known if I hadn't asked about it. So yeah, just don't be afraid to reach out, ask questions, get involved. People are here to help.
I definitely want to quickly just echo what Diana said about the 1-credit mini courses. I am obsessed with them. I love them so much. I haven't like experienced anything like that in undergrad, taking just such like a rush of information all at once. And I'm assuming the reason why Diana mentioned the immigration one is because she might have just done it. I'm not entirely sure, but I took that one last semester and it was amazing. And I'm not someone who is like, I really want to work with the immigrant populations or even just like immigration advocacy. Like it's something that just interests me, but it wasn't where I was like, I really want to work in this. But I overly enjoyed the class and definitely was like, maybe I do want to work in something like that. So I highly recommend those. They're really short. So if you like absolutely like hate the topic after all, like it's not actually like a huge waste of time or your energy or anything, because they usually are just like just a weekend or 2 Saturdays or 2 Wednesdays. And that's really cool. I love those classes.
So we have 5 minutes left. If anybody has any last burning questions, please feel free to, drop it in the chat or in the Q&A. I will also put my email in the chat. If people have questions later on, we're happy to answer, your emails or your questions. I think a couple of us will also be still students in the fall, so you can always hit us up for questions then. But yeah, does anybody have any, I don't want to cut us off short if anybody has any questions.
We also did drop a link in the chat to the list of and links to register for our future webinars. So that'll be about like fields and then classes and professors. And I think we have one about housing, so a little bit more specific and a chance to ask even more questions throughout the summer.
And this webinar, along with the rest of them, are all recorded as well. So if you can't make it to the ones in the future, or if you want to revisit this one, there's also, I believe they usually post the transcripts of the chat as well. So that should be available to you as well.
It looks like everyone has all of their questions answered. So I'm glad that we were able to be helpful to you all, and our emails are in the chat. And thank you for joining us tonight.